Hi, everybody. It's Laurie White from the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to episode number 69 of Chamber TV. And today we're delighted to welcome Tom Parrish, the Executive Director of Trinity Repertory Company in Providence. So welcome, Tom. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Laurie. Thanks for having me on your show.
Fantastic. Thank you for being with us. So we start off all of our broadcasts by asking our guests a very simple question. How are you doing? How's your family? How are you making it through these very difficult days?
Well, making it through okay, all things considered. I mean, I've never quite experienced anything like this, as I'm sure most have not. And my family's good, staying connected, and I have a lot of family spread around, so staying connected virtually and seeing a lot of friends. It's actually been sort of a blessing in a way. I'm connecting with people more than I probably did before, and that's been really great. The advent of these sort of virtual meetings.
Exactly. I think we're all feeling the same way. People talk about Zoom fatigue, but I've actually enjoyed having the opportunity to get to know people on a deeper level and a more regular level than perhaps in the past. So I agree with you. It's a great way to it's a great way to learn, and we can all learn together, and we can all stay connected and find a little solace in these days. So, tell me a little bit about what's going on at Trinity Rep. You are the executive director. You have been for, I'm guessing, 5 or 6 years at this point?
About 5 years at this
Yep,
point.
5 years, right. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from? And I know that you have some very strong competencies in financial management, fiscal management, audience development, which has really been most appreciated in your new role. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I was born in Buffalo, New York, and grew up in Michigan, and um, went to school originally for pre-med, and thought I was going to be a doctor, and ended up as a theater major. And my parents encouraged me to get a something to fall back on, so I ended up with an economics degree. And little did I know at the time that theater and economics double major was going to set me up for a career in theater management. It's a field that not many people know about. It's very specialized, and requires a balance of both the artistic sensibility and the producing elements with business management as well. So after I did my undergrad at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, I went to graduate school at SMU in Dallas and received my master's in arts administration and my MBA in management consulting and strategy. And from there, went on to have a career at a number of theaters, starting out in San Diego at San Diego Repertory Theater before getting my first executive role at Merrimack Repertory Theater in Lowell, Massachusetts. And it was there that I really found a niche as a person that could transform the business models of legacy institutions. And so each theater that I've been privileged enough to lead has had fiscal challenges. And so using the business skills and also probably some of the pre-med skills of analyzing a situation and diagnosing what's wrong and tweaking and developing the business model to make it more effective and productive has led to financial turnarounds at Merrimack Rep in Lowell. And then I was recruited to Jiva Theater Center in Rochester, New York, where I led a turnaround there, and then was recruited here to Providence, Rhode Island for Trinity Rep, who as an institution has had a long history of financial challenges and struggles. And when I came here 5 years ago, we had $1 million structural deficit and really only 18 months left of runway. And so it was a very fast turnaround and action to grow charitable contributions as well as ticket sales. And very pleased that all of that work has resulted now in 3 years of consecutive operating surpluses, retirement of our accumulated deficit, and incredible growth in both charitable contributions and ticket sales. And it's sad that prior to COVID, we were on track for this season to have our highest selling season in the 56-year history of the theater. And so it was sad to have that season cut short in May. But theater is definitely one of the most impacted industries as a result of COVID.
So I just want to pick up on something that you said a second ago in terms of pre-med and financial management, those two streams coming together. I can see the fiscal management part of it, but the diagnosing part and using your skills as someone who was a pre-med student, say a little bit more about that. That sounds pretty interesting.
Well, one of my skills is being able to see like a whole system and how it functions together and how pieces are interconnected with one another. An organization is structured much in the same way as any other organism, with various systems that function and work together. And so in reviewing an organization and its business model and how effective it is not, it's related and similar to how one would diagnose an illness in a human being, for example. And so with my background in strategy and my understanding of the economics and business of theater production, I'm able to go into an organization and look at how the entire system functions and where the opportunities are to improve that functioning, and as well as correct anything that may not be functioning properly. So that's sort of one of the ways that I approach the work. Everything's very interconnected and very organic in how theater is produced, and understanding all of that interconnectedness is important for the work.
Is that a fairly unique skill, fairly unique approach to theater management, in your opinion?
I like to think I'm unique. I don't know, does everyone feel special in some way? But yeah, I think I certainly approach problems in different ways than some of my colleagues. And what's great about our field, though, is that we all are very collegial and work together and bounce ideas off of each other. So, we sort of know each other's blind spots and can help coach each other through various issues. So I feel grateful to be in a field that is so collegial and collaborative. Because the way theater is structured in the United States, it's very decentralized, and every city has its own nonprofit theater company, some more than one theater company, and so they can be very isolated. And so we're a part of a national association called the League of Resident Theaters, and what's been great during the pandemic is we've been on calls regularly and sharing ideas on how to maneuver through all of this, because it has just been so impactful on our business.
So before we go into the impact of the pandemic, let's stick with the topic of what you saw when you came. You mentioned fundraising, you mentioned structural deficits. What was the most surprising and the easiest thing, if you will, for you to address when you came into town 5 years ago?
Well, I think unlike some of the other places I had been, there wasn't a clear one particular area that needed work. It really was a whole host of challenges, and upon looking at it, it was about 70% a revenue problem and 30% an expense problem. And expenses are relatively easy to address. You can sort of look at them and find the biggest pools of opportunity and tackle those, and trying to find efficiencies and more effective ways of doing things. On the revenue side, of course, that's the harder work of business development. And so we set out to grow contributions. Charitable contributions are usually sort of my first step, because and it was true at Trinity too. There are a lot of very loyal and passionate people who care a lot about Trinity Rep, and appealing to them to help be a part of the solution to the problem. and by making charitable contributions. And so one can sort of start to boost the revenue there while doing the more time-consuming work of developing audiences. So over the past 5 years, we've grown ticket sales by over 30%, and we've grown charitable contributions by over 70%. And with all of that, it's sort of closed that $1 million structural deficit that we've had. Where when I got to Providence, Trinity Rep had $9 million in expenses and $8 million in revenue, and now we have over $10 million in revenue and $10 million in expenses. So there's really been growth, and it wasn't all just cutting expenses. There was a lot of revenue development work that had to be done in building relationships with people, and some brand work to realign the organization and the programming with our brand and with the market. Some audience intelligence and getting to know the audience better. All of that was a part of the solution for turning Trinity Rep around.
Yeah. So, how much does the specific productions that you choose to present in the theater impact ticket sales? I know that sounds like an obvious question a little bit, but do people that love live theater, they're willing to take a chance at any production, or is it essential that you have the right mix of acts, if you will, or productions to balance off in terms of different tastes and preferences and demographics and the like?
Well, the play selection or what we choose to produce is hugely important to ticket sales. We're very much organized around a customer lifetime value business model. And so in our business model and how we function is we sell individual tickets to productions, and with the goal of maintaining those folks and building their loyalty so that they become season ticket holders. When we sell an individual ticket, we are actually losing money on that. And we lose money producing theater in general. It's partly why we're a nonprofit and need charitable contributions to subsidize the work. We produce in very intimate venues. We're making everything from scratch. If you can imagine doing 6 or 7 new product launches for a company in a year, that's a lot even for a for-profit company. And that's what we do every year. And so we lose money on the individual tickets, but the goal is to retain those customers over time, convert them into season ticket holders and then into donors. And it's on the donor end where there's actually a margin that helps to subsidize the theater production. And another thing that's unique in the way Trinity Rep is structured is we're as much an educational institution as we are a theater producer, and almost half of our budget is spent on educational programming, which has been a blessing during this pandemic because we have been able to at least maintain a good portion of our operation.
It's so fascinating that you've been able to continue that educational component of your work over all these years. I remember when I was in grammar school myself, and the yellow bus would take us to Trinity Rep so that we could watch a production. And all these years later, many years later, that's still a key element of what you're doing to educate and to expose young people to theater.
Yeah, it was. Arts education was one of the early principles at Trinity Rep. And when we were started, we were one of the grandfathers of the American theater. And there were not theater companies around the United States back then like there are today. And it was really an early movement that started these nonprofit theater companies in various communities. And when the National Endowment for the Arts began with legislation sponsored by Senator Pell from Rhode Island, there was initial investment in experimenting with arts education. And it was a $1 million grant per year for 3 years. And Trinity Rep, lo and behold, Senator Pell's home state, was one of the 3 theaters in the United States selected to pilot arts education in the United States. And that ballooned our budget incredibly back then. If you imagine $1 million back then, it's about $8 million today, inflation adjusted. So that's an enormous federal investment in arts education. And that is really what positioned Trinity Rep going into the future. And the program that you mentioned, Laurie, Project Discovery, where students come and see productions, it was really innovative, and it forced some interesting innovations that have affected Trinity Rep's aesthetic going forward. Our artistic director and founder, Adrian Hall, at the time was not interested in doing children's theater or plays for young people. He was interested in doing the same adult season for young people. And what we found was that we couldn't keep young people's attention in the theater. And so it forced a change in our aesthetic, and led by the great Eugene Lee, who's one of our resident designers, and Adrian Hall. And they found a way to keep people's attention by breaking the fourth wall, that invisible barrier between the stage and the audience, and having actors go through it, as well as interacting, being a much more interactive space. And that was particularly innovative at the time, and has helped to mold our aesthetic going forward. So education is one of our 3 core values at Trinity, and has been very influential in how we produce.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing what a legacy Senator Pell has left to all of us, and not only in the arts, but in his contribution to college education and scholarship and Pell grants and the like. So what an amazing public servant he was, and we all mourned his passage a number of years ago. So let's talk a little bit about the season that just concluded, aka just got cut short a little bit. And one of your more popular productions was The Prince of Providence. And we had teamed up, the Chamber and Trinity, and bringing in some of the actors that were starring in The Prince of Providence to talk a little bit about what was happening behind the scenes. So tell us that story, and tell us more about the reprise of The Prince of Providence that's scheduled for next year, hopefully.
Yeah, well, what's remarkable is, in the history of Trinity Rep and all of those financial struggles, Buddy Cianci was the saving grace of the theater a number of times. And as it turned out, posthumously, he sort of did it again, in a way, because that production, which we opened the 2019-2020 season with, The Prince of Providence, an adaptation of the book by Mike Stanton, that adaptation became our highest grossing show in the history of the theater. That wasn't A Christmas Carol. Christmas Carol tops the boards for us, but of any show in our history, it beat the record set by My Fair Lady in the early 2000s, which was in a theater twice the size. So this was in our 250-seat theater. It was like producing Hamilton. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. Just the demand and the buzz around that production. We had news coverage. It was named one of the best productions by the New York Times for 2019. We had coverage from around the world. We had people from around the world. We had audience from over 30 states come to see it. It was a truly remarkable theatrical production, and really set us up for a fantastic season. And as I mentioned, we were on track to have the highest selling season in our history until it was cut short in March, and we ended up having to cancel over 80 performances, and which is like the equivalent of 2.5 productions in our season, and at a loss of about $1 million in ticket sales. So it was very sad, because well, I guess it still was a wonderful season. I mean, the work that we did this season was great. We had a wonderful production of A Christmas Carol. We did a production of Fade by Tanya Sriracho, and Radio Golf by August Wilson, and A Tale of Two Cities, a new adaptation of that. And that is the production that was cut short. And fortunately, we were able to make an archival recording of that production before we got canceled. Actually, we captured the performance the night before the theaters got shut down due to COVID. And so we were able to work with our collective bargaining partners and the rights holders to stream that production to the canceled ticket holders. So people actually did get to see that show, even though we couldn't do it in person anymore. But then Sweat our production of Sweat by Lynn Nottage and Sweeney Todd, we pivoted and pushed them into next season. So yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Was that archival recording just by happenstance, or did you have a feeling this was coming down the pike and this was a saving grace?
Well, we were watching the situation very closely starting in late February. And as I mentioned, we're a part of the National League of Resident Theaters, and some of our colleagues who are out on the West Coast, in particular San Francisco, which was one of the early spots for coronavirus. And so we sort of had that heads up. And so when it looked like things were starting to really take a turn here in Rhode Island, we made sure to get a capture of that. Unfortunately, it was just a single camera on the back of the theater. It wasn't like the production of Hamilton that you can get on Disney Plus now, which was a 3-camera shoot over multiple performances and edited so that it looks near perfect. Ours was 1 camera in the back of the theater for 1 performance. And I remember the next day we had a student matinee, and we had and most of the students had canceled. The schools had canceled at that point. So we just had 1 class, and I want to say there was maybe 30 students at that performance, and they were the last live audience that we had. And it was pretty special. They had their own like intimate little performance of A Tale of Two Cities.
Mm-hmm. So the Prince of Providence, let's just wrap up that discussion of how that production went and the acclaim that Trinity got from all over the country and all over the world in terms of presenting the story by Mike Stanton. What are the next steps with the Prince of Providence, and I know it's certainly our hope and intention, but do you envision that it will return to a stage again with a live audience?
That's the plan and the hope. We announced back in the spring that we were planning a revival for 2021. And so we are looking to do it in the spring of 2021, pending our ability to gather and produce again. I mean, that's the big question mark. What's going to happen on the vaccine and treatment front? How long is social distancing going to be with us? All of those factors are at play in whether we'll be able to produce it. But the plan is to revive the production and do it again.
Yeah. Same cast?
As much as we can. I mean, it's been a year and a half will have passed at that point, and we'll try and assemble as much of the cast and original production as we can for the revival.
So take us through a little bit of the art and science of choosing plays to present, and also the art and the science of dynamic seating and the pricing. So give us a little behind the scenes tutorial on how all that is part of the organic system of a theater.
Sure. So in a resident theater like Trinity Rep, as I mentioned, we have a core group of subscribers, and they're the primary ticket buyers. And so while each piece of theater we choose to produce is an artistic creation, the entire collection of the plays is a narrative as well, and creates an arc that we're telling for our season ticket holders throughout the year. And so we're looking at the individual stories we tell, and then how those stories interact with each other during the course of the year as people experience multiple plays. And as I said, everything that
is that distinct to Trinity, or is that a phenomenon that's embraced throughout the industry?
That's mostly how the nonprofit regional theaters function. A more commercial model of theater would have a show open, it would run for an extended period of time and then close. Whereas we're in constant conversation with the community that we serve. And we're very much, our mission at Trinity Rep is to reinvent the public square. And so our work is very much produced through a social justice and civic engagement lens, and bringing people together around stories that relate to contemporary issues or challenges that we're facing as a community. And using the art as a way to bring people together to hopefully have dialogue around and come to some solutions around how to address those contemporary issues. So We produce a very broad spectrum of work at Trinity Rep. It's one of our hallmarks. We have new and contemporary plays. We have classics, including Shakespeare. We always do a Christmas Carol. It's a huge tent pole in the middle of the season. But we also try to be representative of the community that we serve. And so we produce a multitude of voices um, on our stages and try to bring different narratives and dialogues to the community. And so it's really a balance between all of those factors. And then on top of that, there's the lens of the financial lens that goes with it. And choosing a season that we can actually afford to produce, balancing what we think we can sell in tickets, and then how much in charitable contributions we can raise. In some respects, when I started in this business, I thought that theaters had to fundraise because we weren't good at selling tickets. But in reality, the reason we have to charge for tickets is because we can't achieve full subsidy either through charitable contributions or government support like happens in other countries. So we have to earn it at the box office to a degree, which fights against our desire to be an open community space where everyone can participate in the conversation. But you brought up the idea of dynamic pricing, and so one thing that we do at Trinity is our prices are dynamic, and they fluctuate with demand, as well as how early someone buys a ticket. The best way to get the cheapest ticket is to buy well in advance, because as a show becomes more popular and the inventory depletes, the prices go up in the same way that airlines and hotels price their product. And so we always want to maximize the amount of ticket revenue we get. The reality being, though, that if we sell out all of our seats, we still don't cover the cost of production. Because we are making everything from scratch. And so it's a very delicate balancing act and finding ways to subsidize the actual production of the theater.
Is that an algorithm that just kind of kicks in from a dynamic pricing and seating perspective, or is there some degree of human intervention or interpretation or moderations, to override the algorithm, if you will?
It's still very much a manually done exercise. I think, like a lot of theater management, it's both art and science, and because art is very dynamic. It's human beings and which are dynamic, and it's human beings interacting, which is even more dynamic. And so there has to be that human element and that art of balancing everything. That's not to say we don't have systems in place to try and bring some science and logic to it, but it is a mix of both. And for me, that's what's fun. As someone who sort of started out in science and then transitioned to art, it's like the best of both, and it's why I've loved what I do for so long.
Yeah. Well, that's like both sides of the brain too. So that's kind of unusual to be able to have that degree of competency going both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and it was always a struggle when I was growing up, trying to find that balance, because I was a pretty artsy kid. I think I played an instrument, I sang, and I was a magician for however many years. That's actually the first shows I produced. I set up a tent in my backyard and did magic shows for the neighborhood, and would sell tickets. And so there was always sort of that push-pull between the artistic and creative side and the more logical and analytical side. And theater management was a field that allowed me to reconcile those two very well.
What was your best trick?
Oh gosh. I don't know. Looking back, I probably wasn't as good or committed as some of my friends who actually, some have actually gone on to do it as a career. But I actually owned white doves and everything when I was a kid. I thought I wanted to do it, but ultimately, no.
So can you share any secrets of the sleight of hand? What are we not seeing when we see a successful trick?
Well, it was really interesting. I went to see, there was a magic show, I guess one would call it a magic show, on Broadway last fall, and called Secret. And it was interesting because here was this big, very expensive show, and some of the tricks were based on some of the things that I did in my backyard tents, or that I would do at children's birthday parties when I was 15 years old, but very dressed up and much more elaborately produced.
Yeah. So what is the trick?
Well, there's sleight of hand and patter and how and misdirection, all of those storytelling, getting people to follow where you want them to follow,
Yeah.
and
Not pay attention to what you don't want them to pay attention to at that moment.
yes.
Yeah. Great.
So,
All right. So we were talking about this season that got cut short, and then we were also talking about the collegial nature of resident theater companies around the country, in cities and towns, and the support that you provide to one another. So how are you going to take live theater and really save it during this very delicate period where people, whether or not they're not going back to work, and they're very skeptical about going out and shopping and the like, and I would imagine that being in a close theater environment is like a triple impediment to having life return to normal, if that's at all possible within the theater family.
yeah. Well, in addition to the health concerns, the concept of social distancing completely destroys the economics of theater. As I mentioned, even if we sold every seat we had, we require subsidy and lose money. So if we have to socially distance, it cuts the capacity of the theater down to about 30%. And so if we can only sell 30% of the inventory we have, we couldn't cover the cost when we could sell 100% of the inventory. There's no way to cover the cost at 30% of the inventory. So that's the economic dilemma that goes with it. But then the health challenges on top of it. There are the challenges for the audience, but there's also for the artists and the staff too. Producing theater is a very intimate business. You have people on stage dancing or singing or hugging or kissing or interacting very closely to one another. So how do we do that in a safe manner? And that's the delicate course that we're on right now, and it's truly a precarious situation. I've learned more about droplets and just the concept of thinking about droplets is it's mind-blowing. I will never use a public restroom the same way again. In thinking about how public restrooms function, how groups function, people talking and singing and gathering, and the reality is, like, human beings are pretty gross creatures, and how what comes out of our mouths when we talk and everything. It's just it's been a really interesting lens to see the world through. But we're working our way through it to find the way to produce in the safest way possible for the audience as well as the staff and artists. And actually working on writing a draft reopening plan right now. All of our work needs to be approved by our labor unions and our partners there, because we need to create a safe environment for people to work in, and a way to mitigate risk, minimize risk, so that we can keep people safe and healthy. I think, like, when we got shut down in March, we immediately pivoted to digital as much as we could. All of our education classes, we started doing virtual classes for that. We, in partnership with Brown University, have a graduate Master of Fine Arts program in acting and directing, and we pivoted that all to remote learning. And so classes continued all through the spring. And then we created some additional digital offerings to keep people engaged throughout. But the digital is partly with us for a while. Even when we do get to live production again, I I imagine there will be people who don't feel comfortable going to the theater. And so we're working with our collective bargaining partners to find a way so that we can sell virtual tickets and stream the productions online so that people can still participate virtually if they don't feel comfortable being in the room with the performers. But as we think about how does one stage a play socially distanced? Do the performers wear masks? Can they wear masks? And what does that mean from there are a whole bunch of considerations, just even how the Americans with Disabilities Act intersects with mask wearing, and how people that rely on lip reading, how does that, how does that work if people are wearing masks for front of house personnel as well as for performers? And then socially distancing the way the guidelines are right now, the actors have to be so far apart, we can only put 1 or 2 actors on the stage to begin with. So,
so is it a little bit like school or university where they're going to keep the students in a pod, so they're going to live together, they're going to work together, they're going to study together, and they're all tested on the way in and on the way out. So is that some of the thinking behind keeping the actors together and safe and cohesive?
Yeah, well, one of the benefits for Trinity Rep is we have a resident acting company. So the core of our actors live right here in Rhode Island, which is great. A lot of our colleagues bring artists from out of town, which adds a whole nother level of difficulty and bring people from outside of the area. And we also have a lot of married couples in our acting company. So if we keep couples and households in the acting company sort of quarantined together, it's possible that we may be able to achieve some level of physical intimacy on stage and not have to do the social distancing as much. It would just be between groups of households. Yeah, but trying to keep everything as simple and contained as possible. I think that's one of the things I've learned during the pandemic is really keep it simple. The more complex it is, the more risk there is that the virus is going to blow it up. And I've also learned that what we know we'll know more tomorrow than we know today, and no one knows anything. Those are like the 3 lessons that I've learned during the pandemic, I think. And just staying flexible and moving with the science and talking to people about best practice to see if there is a way to thread the needle and make it happen.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that we were talking about earlier today that we've learned collectively as a group is the horizon has become narrower, if you will, and where people would talk about, 3-year plans, 2-year plans, stretch goals. But now everything from a timeline perspective has become so much more compressed that we're thinking in 2-week, 4-week, 6-week, 2-month segments rather than, a year out or 2 years out. So I don't know how you, in your position, when it takes such an enormous amount of effort and creativity to, as you put it, do everything from scratch, create everything from scratch. That's probably a really tall order for theater.
Yeah, it's tough because it takes about 3 months from when if we were to decide we were going to produce a show, it would be 3 months from now before that would even be on stage. Between the design of it and building it and rehearsing it and staging it and selling it, there's a 3-month lead time. So what's challenging is we have no certainty about what the future holds, or what the direction of the science is going to be, or the direction of the government's going to be. And so it's really hard to produce in that scenario, let alone budget. So what we ended up doing at Trinity Rep is the board did pass a budget, and it's set up like a series of nesting dolls, and there are various decision points along the way. And essentially, we had to hunker down and almost hibernate in a way, and get as lean as we possibly could. And it's definitely like the hardest thing I've ever done is trying to figure out how to contract to the smallest, leanest point without causing long-term damage and making it so that we can expand again, right? So that's the challenge. We've gone from during the season, we typically have like 120 full-time equivalent employees, and we have 28 right now. So
is anything going on at the theater? Is there any activity at all?
The education programs are still running. We have right now digital camps that are running through the month of July, and then we have we're going to start in-person camps in August. So we have 2 weeks of in-person camps with young people. And then Brown University is planning to resume classes in the fall, and so the MFA program that we run with them is also we're also planning to have in-person classes in the fall. So we're ramping up to do that and have we house all of that program on our campus. We have about 125,000 square feet of space and 3 theaters spread across multiple buildings. And so we're planning to have that activity all through the fall. So we're actually probably bigger than some of our peers, or staffed higher than some of our peers might be, who are just theater producers. But yeah, that activity is happening. We're also doing digital programming. Our artistic director has a weekly talk show that he does. It's called Your Half Hour Call with Kurt. It's every Thursday at 7:30. And we have various guests and artists on that. And we're also producing other digital content, which we roll out on our website and social media platforms. We have a page on our website called The Show Goes On. And we have all sorts of content, clips of past productions, interviews, actors doing little tidbits there. So we do have activity, but we're basically scaled and as tight as we possibly can be. And then when it looks like on that 3 to 6 month time horizon that we can produce again, then we'll start to ramp up and go back into production. We're currently still hopeful that November, December is a possibility for A Christmas Carol this year. It's been a holiday tradition in Southern New England for over 40 years, and we want to keep that tradition alive. So that's our next checkpoint, is to see over the coming weeks whether we feel confident that we'll be able to move forward with that.
Yeah. So in the remaining few minutes that we have, what can you share with individuals that might be interested in using this time where they have some extra free time to really get more engaged and more familiar with the work that you're doing at Trinity?
Well, we have a ton of really great digital content on our website. As I mentioned, the show goes on there, and we have Trinity Rep radio theater podcasts that people can listen to with like radio plays that we recorded with Rhode Island Public Radio a number of years ago and sort of resurrected them. The acting company members have also recorded Shakespearean sonnets. They've done little scenes. There's some behind the scenes interviews with them, and then we have the weekly show that we do each week, and all of those past episodes are archived on our website as well. You can take a stroll down memory lane and watch scenes from some of your favorite productions over the past decade. And then we do have the classes, and for folks who want to take classes, those are enrolling. We'll have another batch of classes coming up in the fall for folks, and as I mentioned, we're dipping our toe in the in-person waters here in August, and we'll see how that goes. Of course, with all of the health and safety protocols for childcare. But there are lots of opportunities to stay engaged. Social media, Trinity Rep has very active Facebook and Instagram accounts, and people can stay engaged with us there.
What has been your favorite production that you've seen? So we know that Prince of Providence and A Christmas Carol are 2 marquee productions that everybody knows about, but give us one of your favorites that might not be top of mind for everyone, that they should immediately go out and get familiar with and really enjoy based on your recommendation.
Well, we had I think 2 of my favorite productions at Trinity Rep were The Mountaintop and Ragtime. both of which we have clips of on our website. But Kurt Columbus directed a production of Ragtime that was just absolutely stunning, and probably in the top 5 shows I've ever experienced in my life. It was absolutely incredible. And there are some clips of that online. And then the mountaintop was, the mountaintop was great. Also, Black Odyssey, we had a production of Black Odyssey, and we have clips of that online. But those are some of my Trinity Rep favorites, and so I encourage people to check those out.
All right, so is it trinityrep.org where people can find you?
TrinityRep.com.
TrinityRep.com.
Yep.
Lots of rich digital content. People can get interested in learning how to be a performer, an actor. Also learn some behind the scenes sort of techniques and the like, and stand in your shoes for just a second as you envision the theater going forward. So we thank you so much, Tom, for being with us, for taking the time out of your day to share your success. And I also want to, on behalf of all of us at the Chamber, really thank you and congratulate you for keeping Trinity Rep in great financial shape. We value your work as a member of our board of directors, but we are so thrilled and awed that you have brought your unique set of talents to Providence and to keep such a storied institution alive and very vibrant. So for that, our hats are off to you.
Thank you, Laurie. That really means a lot. I should also encourage people to subscribe too. We've got subscription packages available for next season, and people can buy those on our website as well. And subscribe to Hope. I mean, we will be back, and it's just a question of when, not whether we will be or not.
Fantastic. So subscribe to the full portfolio of performances at Trinity Rep. Follow them on social media. Follow them on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and everything else. And certainly spend a few moments going through the archives and seeing what we may have missed in the last several months. So again, thank you, Tom. Be well, and we will hopefully see you in person very soon.
Yes. Thanks, Laurie.
Thank you.